The galaxy had lived under the shadow of the Zalthirian Empire for thousands of years. Their fleets stretched across hundreds of systems, their soldiers enforced order with iron discipline, and their leaders ruled with fear. For countless generations, no one had dared to challenge them. The smaller races bent their heads, paid their tribute, and prayed that the Empire's gaze would never fall too hard upon them. The Zalthirians believed themselves untouchable, the supreme rulers of all known space. But everything changed on the day an unknown signal was picked up on the edge of their territory. At first the signal seemed weak, just static and broken noise, something their engineers thought could be dismissed as background radiation. Yet the readings did not fade. Instead, they grew stronger each passing hour, steady and deliberate, as if something was moving closer. The Empire's admirals ordered more scans. They wanted to know if it was a hidden fleet, perhaps rebels trying new technology. But the data was confusing. The object was massive, larger than any warship they had ever built. Some said it was a station, others said it was a new kind of weapon. In their arrogance the admirals laughed, thinking no one could ever build something greater than the Empire. Still, they sent ships to investigate. Those ships never returned. Reports came back only as silence, communications cut off mid-sentence, as though the crews had been swallowed by the void itself. Soon, whispers began to spread. The civilians on outer colonies spoke of a monster ship drifting closer, a ship that destroyed without firing a shot. Fear began to stir in places the Empire thought were secure. But in the grand halls of the capital, the rulers dismissed it as rumor. The Empire was eternal, they claimed, nothing could shake its power. They had forgotten the old stories. Long ago, before the Empire rose, there had been another race that walked the stars. Ancient records told of them as wanderers and warriors, builders of great ships and wielders of terrible weapons. Some called them Terrans, others simply called them humans. Most thought the stories were myths, campfire tales told by frightened children. But the oldest among the alien scholars knew. They remembered the warnings passed down through generations. The humans had once fought the first empires, and where they went, empires fell. The Zalthirians had always believed those humans were extinct, wiped away by time, but now, on the edge of their galaxy, a ship unlike any other drifted forward. It bore the markings of humanity. The first clear image shocked the admirals. The ship was dark and massive, kilometers long, armored like no vessel they had ever seen. Its design was cold, sharp, and brutal, made for war and nothing else. The name etched on its hull was in a language they barely remembered from ancient records, Terran. The admirals argued among themselves. Some said it must be abandoned, a relic drifting through space. Others warned that no relic could move with such purpose. But when the ship's engines lit up, bright and powerful, all arguments ended. This was no ghost. This was a living weapon, and it was coming closer. Panic began to ripple through the Empire's high command. Fleets were scrambled, messages sent to every outpost. But fear had already spread faster than their orders. Soldiers whispered that the humans had returned. Civilians locked their doors and prayed to their gods. The Empire's rulers called for calm, claiming their power was still absolute. Yet in the silence of the war room, even they felt unease. The Empire had seen rebellions, had seen invasions, but never before had a single ship carried such dread. The Terran battleship did not answer any hails. It did not respond to warnings or threats. It simply drifted deeper into their space, unstoppable, as though nothing they said mattered. One scout ship got close enough to try to scan it. Before its data stream ended abruptly, a single line of transmission slipped through. It said only 2 words. "We return." That message spread across the Empire like fire in dry grass. The old myths were true. Humanity had not vanished. Humanity had not forgotten. They had waited, they had built, and now they were here again. On the Empire's border worlds, fear turned into chaos. Governors reported unrest, riots, and even rebellions beginning. Ordinary people who had once obeyed the Empire without question now whispered that the humans would free them. Others whispered that the humans would kill them all. No one knew which was true, and that uncertainty fed the panic. Meanwhile, the Terran ship kept advancing. It moved with calm precision, not in a rush, not afraid. Every system it passed through fell silent, not because it destroyed anything, but because the Empire dared not challenge it. The admirals still argued, torn between pride and terror. To admit fear of a single ship was unthinkable, yet to ignore it was suicide. The Empire had always ruled through intimidation, but now they were the ones intimidated. On the seventh day, the Terran ship crossed into the Empire's inner border. By then, every screen, every communication channel, every military report spoke only of its approach. The rulers gathered in the great council chamber, their voices rising in anger and fear. They demanded to know what this ship wanted. They demanded to know why their mighty fleets had fallen silent. But no one had answers. Only silence met them. Silence, and the growing shadow of a ship that should not exist. On the eighth day, the battleship finally stopped. It hovered at the edge of a rich star system, its black hull reflecting the light of a dozen suns. Entire fleets surrounded it, weapons ready. Yet none fired. None dared. Across the Empire, millions of beings stared at their screens, watching live feeds of the monstrous vessel. They waited, breath held, for it to make its move. And then, for the first time, the ship spoke. A deep voice echoed through every channel, every frequency, every world. It was not loud, but it carried the weight of final judgment. It said, "Your empire ends now." The galaxy held its breath. The words of the Terran battleship echoed across the galaxy and reached every world of the Empire like thunder that rolled forever. Your empire ends now. At first many did not believe what they heard. Some thought it was a trick, some thought it was false propaganda made by rebels, and others believed it was a mistake. But the images were clear and undeniable. The giant dark warship was real, and the voice carried a weight that could not be ignored. For the first time in thousands of years, the people of the Empire felt something they had forgotten long ago. They felt fear. Across the border systems, panic spread like fire. Merchants refused to travel. Colonists locked themselves inside their homes. Governors tried to calm the citizens with promises of protection, but their voices shook with doubt. Soldiers who once stood proudly now whispered among themselves. They repeated the old myths that their grandparents once told them at night. Stories of the humans, the Terrans, the warriors who had fought whole empires and broken them like glass. The Empire had always dismissed these as bedtime tales, but now those stories returned to every mind, and each story ended with the same warning. If humanity comes back, no empire can stand. The admirals in the high command sat around glowing star maps, their faces pale and their voices heavy with fear. Some demanded immediate attack. They said the Empire must crush the Terran ship before it could move further. Others warned that attacking might only bring destruction faster. Reports from the fleets that had engaged earlier were still missing, only fragments of broken messages remained. One admiral swore that his brother commanded a fleet of 200 ships that vanished in a single hour. No one believed him at first, but the silence of that fleet confirmed it. Something terrible had happened, and none of them wanted to admit the truth. The truth was simple. The Empire was no longer the strongest force in the galaxy. For the rulers of the Empire, the fear was even worse. In their great marble halls they had ruled with confidence, their voices echoing like gods over their people. But now their speeches sounded empty. They called the humans liars, they promised victory, but deep inside they knew their power was slipping away. On distant colonies, ordinary people began to rebel. Some declared themselves free from the Empire, waving old flags that had been hidden for generations. Others rose in violence, burning imperial banners and chanting for the Terrans. To them the battleship was not a destroyer but a liberator. They believed that humanity had returned to break the chains of slavery. Yet not all felt this way. On some worlds fear turned into despair. Priests declared that the return of the humans meant the end of all life. Families fled to the mountains and the seas, trying to hide from a power that could not be stopped. Criminal gangs grew stronger, chaos spread, and the Empire's grip weakened further with every passing day. The Terran ship still moved slowly, deliberately, system by system, as if it did not care about the chaos it created. It did not need to fire its weapons. Its very presence was enough to break the Empire's control. Each time it entered a new system, communications cut off, not because the ship destroyed them, but because fear silenced them. Civilian ships refused to carry Imperial orders, local commanders abandoned their posts, and entire armies deserted without firing a shot. The Empire had always ruled with the illusion of strength, but illusions vanish when true strength appears. The rulers sent desperate messages to the Terran ship, demanding talks, begging for diplomacy. The ship gave no reply. Instead, another short transmission came. This time it was only 3 words. "We remember you." Those words caused even more fear than before. The Empire had hoped that humanity was ignorant of them, that perhaps the Terrans had stumbled here by chance. But now it was clear. The humans knew who they were, and they had not forgotten the crimes of the Empire. Long ago, during the first rise of the Zalthirian Empire, they had enslaved weaker races and destroyed those who resisted. Among those early victims were human colonies. Records of those ancient battles had been buried, erased from history, but the Terrans had not forgotten. Their return was not an accident. It was vengeance. In the academies of the Empire, young officers whispered to each other in fear. They studied the design of the Terran ship, its strange weapons, its dark armor. None of it made sense. The technology was beyond them, far beyond anything they could create. The oldest scholars remembered fragments of ancient texts that spoke of human science, of machines that could tear holes in space, of weapons that could split stars. If even half of it was true, the Empire had no chance. One by one the outer colonies fell silent. Not destroyed, not invaded, simply silent. Their governors surrendered without a fight. Their garrisons vanished into hiding. The Empire's supply lines broke apart. Each report that reached the capital grew worse, and still the Terran ship came closer. The Empire tried to use propaganda. They told their people that the humans were weak, that this was only a trick. They spread false stories that the Terran ship was damaged and barely surviving. But the people had eyes. They could see the truth. The humans were not weak. They were unstoppable. On the 12th day after the first message, a council of the Empire's highest rulers gathered in secret. Their voices were low, trembling. They admitted for the first time that they might not survive. Some suggested surrender, others suggested fleeing to another galaxy. A few hardliners demanded one last desperate strike with all their forces. But deep inside, all of them knew the truth. Nothing they could do would stop what was coming. Meanwhile, in the darkness of space, the Terran battleship powered its engines again. Its black hull shimmered under distant starlight as it turned directly toward the Empire's capital systems. And across the galaxy, billions of beings felt the same cold thought at once. The humans are coming. The Terran battleship moved like a shadow through the stars, silent and unstoppable, a dark figure against the light of suns. Entire fleets watched its progress, yet none dared to fire, for they knew the fate of those who had tried before. The Empire's high command was trapped in fear and anger. Their leaders demanded answers, their admirals demanded action, but the truth was clear to everyone in the room. Nothing had worked, and nothing they tried would likely succeed. Still, pride blinded them. The Empire had ruled for thousands of years, and to do nothing would be to admit weakness. And so, a decision was made. They would send diplomats. They would try to speak with the humans, to discover their purpose, to buy time if nothing else. A grand delegation was formed, made up of the Empire's finest envoys and speakers, beings who had persuaded whole worlds to bend the knee in the past. Their ships approached the Terran battleship carefully, broadcasting messages of peace and friendship. But the Terran ship remained silent. It did not even acknowledge their presence. The diplomats grew nervous, but they tried again, offering gifts, promising trade, even offering alliance. For a long time, there was nothing, only silence. Then suddenly, without warning, the Terran battleship shifted its position. Its massive hull turned slowly, its weapons glowing faintly, and the smaller diplomatic ships trembled in fear. The envoys begged for a response, any response, but the humans said nothing. The silence was worse than any threat. The diplomats tried to retreat, but before they could, their ships vanished from every scanner. No explosion, no wreckage, just gone. The Empire's admirals panicked, demanding to know what had happened. But no answer ever came. The Terran battleship continued forward as if the diplomats had never existed. Across the Empire this news caused terror and chaos. If the humans would not speak to diplomats, then there was no hope for peace. Rumors spread like poison. Some claimed the humans were not alive at all, that their battleship was controlled by machines with no mercy. Others swore the humans were alive but had evolved into something far beyond understanding, something closer to gods than mortals. But whatever the truth, one fact was clear. The humans were not interested in negotiation. They had come for something else. On the Empire's border worlds, rebellions grew stronger. People shouted in the streets, demanding freedom, demanding the Empire's soldiers leave. Entire armies deserted, throwing away their weapons and refusing to fight. They believed the Terrans would destroy the Empire anyway, so why die for a lost cause? The Empire tried to crush these rebellions, but every attempt failed. The soldiers who still remained loyal fought without spirit, their hands trembling on their weapons, their eyes darting to the skies, as if they feared the human battleship would appear above them at any moment. Meanwhile, the Terran ship finally sent a transmission. It was the first time it had spoken since its arrival. The message played across the entire Empire, every channel, every screen, every communication band. The voice was deep, cold, and unshakable. It said, "Your rule is over." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of a hammer striking stone. To the rulers of the Empire, it was a death sentence. To the common people, it was a promise of freedom. Across the galaxy, millions cheered, while millions more cowered in fear. No one knew what the humans would do next, but everyone knew nothing would ever be the same again. The admirals scrambled to prepare their fleets. They gathered thousands of ships, the largest armada ever assembled, to stand against the Terran battleship. They told themselves that numbers would win, that no single ship, no matter how powerful, could defeat so many. But deep down, they did not believe it. The memory of vanished fleets haunted them. Still, orders were given, and the great fleets moved into position, waiting for the inevitable battle. In the capital, the rulers screamed at their servants and generals, demanding answers, demanding hope. But there was none. Fear gnawed at their minds, and for the first time in history, they felt powerless. The Terran ship continued its slow march, never rushing, as though it had all the time in the universe. And perhaps it did. It crossed into the system where the Empire's armada waited, its black hull dwarfing even the largest of their ships. The admirals shouted commands, their voices filled with desperation. Thousands of ships turned their weapons toward the lone Terran vessel. The order was given. They fired. The stars themselves seemed to shudder as a storm of energy, missiles, and plasma lit up the void. For a moment it looked like a supernova, a flood of fire so powerful that no living thing could survive. The admirals cheered, believing they had done it, believing the Terran ship was gone. But when the light cleared, the battleship still stood. Not a single scar marked its hull. The alien crews stared in disbelief, their eyes wide with terror. Before they could recover, the Terran ship answered. Beams of pure white light lanced out from its sides, cutting through alien ships like paper. One by one, entire squadrons exploded into dust. The Empire's mighty armada was nothing before the power of the Terran warship. Thousands of ships were destroyed in minutes. The admirals screamed for retreat, but it was already too late. The Terran battleship moved forward, relentless, unstoppable, a predator among prey. The survivors fled in panic, abandoning their weapons, abandoning their honor, fleeing for their lives. The once mighty Empire had never suffered such a defeat. And this was only the beginning. In the silence that followed, across the Empire, a single thought echoed in every mind. The humans had returned, and no one could stop them. The Empire had never seen such destruction. In mere minutes their greatest armada, thousands of ships strong, had been reduced to drifting wreckage and burning debris. The admirals who survived fled in silence, their voices broken, their pride shattered. Entire fleets had vanished, entire squadrons erased, and all of it by one ship, one human battleship. Across the galaxy the news spread like fire in dry fields. No one could hide the truth now. The Terran ship was unstoppable. Still, the Empire refused to admit defeat. Pride and fear drove them to madness. In their desperation they gathered an even greater fleet, pulling ships from every corner of their territory. Warships were recalled from distant colonies, garrisons stripped of defenders, freighters turned into makeshift carriers. The Empire's rulers declared that this would be the final stand. They promised victory, they swore that the Terran ship would fall, and they forced every world under their control to send reinforcements. Soon, the largest fleet in history was assembled near the heart of the Empire. 10,000 ships, armed with the strongest weapons they could build, formed a wall of firepower across the stars. Every admiral, every commander, every soldier was told this was their chance to save the Empire. But in their hearts, fear still gnawed at them. When the Terran battleship finally arrived, the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. It drifted into the system like a shadow, its black hull reflecting the light of the twin suns, its engines silent and steady. Compared to the massive armada waiting for it, the ship looked small, but everyone knew the truth. This was no ordinary vessel. This was the ship that had destroyed everything before it. The admirals gave the order. The Empire's fleet advanced, weapons glowing, engines roaring. Thousands of warships moved as one, their guns locked on the lone Terran vessel. For a moment the silence was unbearable, and then the stars exploded. Missiles, plasma beams, railgun fire, energy lances, all unleashed at once in a storm that lit the void brighter than a sun. The sheer force of the attack could have destroyed a planet. The admirals watched, their hearts racing, as the Terran ship was swallowed by fire. But when the light cleared, the battleship was still there. Its shields shimmered faintly, its black armor untouched. It had not moved, not even flinched. The Empire's fleet froze in terror, but the Terran ship did not wait. With a soundless fury, it unleashed its weapons. Beams of light tore through ships in seconds. Entire squadrons vanished in white fire. Missiles streaked from hidden bays, moving faster than the eye could follow, and when they struck, entire cruisers shattered into dust. The Empire's greatest fleet was cut apart as if it were nothing. Admirals screamed commands, ordering flanking maneuvers, desperate charges, retreats, anything to break the slaughter. But nothing worked. The Terran battleship moved like a predator, calm and deliberate, its weapons precise, each shot finding a target with unerring accuracy. Dozens of ships were destroyed every minute. Panic spread through the Empire's fleet. Some ships turned to flee, abandoning the fight. Others fired wildly, their shots missing the mark. The chain of command collapsed as fear consumed them. In the capital, the rulers watched the battle unfold on massive screens. Their faces turned pale, their bodies trembled, as they saw their proud armada torn apart. For centuries they had ruled as gods, but now they looked like frightened children. Still, they ordered the battle to continue, even as their fleets died before their eyes. Hours passed, and the void filled with burning wrecks and drifting corpses. The once mighty fleet was reduced to scattered survivors fleeing in terror. Of the 10,000 ships that had entered the battle, only a few hundred managed to escape, and they carried with them nothing but horror. The Terran ship, untouched and silent, drifted through the wreckage as if it were a graveyard built in its honor. And then, for the first time since the battle began, the battleship spoke. Its voice echoed across every channel, cold and final. "We gave you a chance." Those words chilled the survivors to their core. What did it mean? A chance for what? Surrender? Redemption? None could say. But the meaning was clear. The humans were done with warnings. The Empire had defied them, and now the price was death. On the border worlds, the news of the battle caused chaos and rebellion. The people rose in anger against their imperial masters, inspired by the strength of the humans. To them, The Terran ship was a savior, a beacon of hope that no empire could crush forever. On other worlds, however, fear turned into despair. Entire populations fled their cities, fearing that the humans would come for them next. Temples filled with prayers, streets filled with riots, and everywhere the empire's control unraveled. The rulers sat in silence, unable to believe what they had seen. Their greatest fleet had fallen, their power shattered, their enemies rising. They had thought themselves eternal, but now they realized the truth. Their empire was dying. Yet even in their despair, pride remained. Some still refused to surrender. Some still believed that somehow, with enough weapons, with enough sacrifices, they could destroy the Terrans. But deep inside, all of them knew the truth. One ship had destroyed them, and there were surely more. The Terran battleship did not chase the survivors. It did not need to. The message had been sent, the fear planted deep in every heart. It turned slowly, its engines glowing softly, and began its march again toward the capital of the Empire. And as it moved, the galaxy whispered the same words in fear and awe. One ship against an empire. And the Empire was falling. The wreckage of the Empire's greatest fleet still floated in the cold dark of space when the first whispers of collapse began to spread. News traveled faster than ships, carried by frightened survivors, smugglers, and desperate traders. Everyone now knew the truth. The Empire had gathered 10,000 ships, the largest armada in history, and still one Terran battleship had destroyed them all. It was no longer a rumor or a story told by frightened rebels. It was fact. And that fact shattered the illusion that the Empire was invincible. On the outer colonies, people rose in open defiance. Imperial governors who once ruled with cruelty now found their palaces surrounded by angry crowds. Soldiers who had once enforced order now laid down their weapons, choosing to vanish into the night rather than fight a hopeless war. Rebellions spread like wildfire, fueled by the belief that the humans had returned to break the Empire's chains. Some colonies declared independence openly, raising new banners over their cities, while others simply stopped sending tribute, daring the Empire to punish them. But the Empire could not. Their fleets were gone, their armies fractured, their rulers drowning in fear. For every world they tried to control, two more slipped from their grasp. In the capital, the High Council argued endlessly. Some demanded peace with the Terrans, others demanded one final strike, but none of them had answers. The Emperor himself, a figure once seen as a god, now sat in silence on his throne, his eyes hollow, his hands trembling. He had ruled through fear, but now it was his people who feared something greater than him. The Terran battleship had become a shadow over every conversation, a nightmare haunting every dream. Merchants refused to carry supplies to imperial bases. Entire industrial planets stopped production, either in rebellion or in terror. The Empire's economy, once vast and unshakable, began to break apart. Without resources the fleets could not be rebuilt, and without fleets the Empire could not enforce its rule. Every day reports arrived of new uprisings. Slaves rose against their masters, prisoners broke free, whole species long crushed under the Empire's heel began to fight back. What the humans had destroyed with weapons was only a fraction compared to what they destroyed with fear. The Terran ship itself did not need to move quickly. Its path was steady, deliberate, unstoppable. It advanced toward the heart of the Empire like death itself, slow but certain. Each system it passed through fell silent, not because the battleship destroyed them, but because no one resisted anymore. Local leaders surrendered, military outposts abandoned their posts, and civilians whispered that resistance was meaningless. The humans did not need armies to collapse an empire. Their reputation alone was enough. The Empire tried to spread propaganda, claiming that the Terran ship was damaged and would soon fail, that the humans were only one dying remnant of a forgotten race. But no one believed them. The images of destroyed fleets, the voices of terrified survivors, the silence of fallen systems, all proved the truth. The humans were strong, stronger than anything the galaxy had ever seen. And if this was only one ship, then what else waited beyond the stars? The question echoed across every world, fueling both hope and terror. On some planets rebels shouted in the streets, declaring the dawn of freedom. They painted Terran symbols on their walls, celebrating the fall of the Empire. On others, people hid in fear, wondering if the humans would show mercy or bring only death. In the war councils, the admirals begged the rulers to consider surrender, but pride blinded the High Council. They refused to bow, even as their empire burned around them. They still clung to the illusion that they could survive, that somehow they could outlast the storm. Yet even as they argued, their enemies gathered strength. Old rival kingdoms, once crushed by the Empire, rose again. Pirates who had hidden in the shadows now struck openly, seizing imperial convoys and raiding undefended planets. The Empire, stretched thin and broken, could not stop them. Everywhere chaos spread, and with every passing day, the authority of the Empire crumbled further. And still the Terran battleship moved closer. It sent no more messages, issued no more warnings. It did not need to. Its silence was louder than any threat. Each time its image appeared on a scanner, entire garrisons abandoned their posts, entire cities surrendered without a fight. For centuries the Empire had believed it would last forever. Now, in the span of weeks, it was dying. In the capital, the Emperor finally broke his silence. His voice, once strong and commanding, now shook with fear. He admitted that the Empire might not survive. His words spread panic among his people. If even their godlike ruler had no hope, then truly the end had come. In hidden chambers, some of the rulers made plans to flee, to escape into unknown space and abandon their people. But others refused, swearing to fight until the end, even if it meant total destruction. The Empire was no longer united. It was fractured, broken, turning against itself. And still, far above in the endless void, the Terran battleship came closer, a shadow that grew larger with each passing day. For the people of the Empire, the question was no longer if the humans would destroy them. The question was when. And as rebellion spread, as worlds fell, as rulers trembled, the answer became clear. The collapse had already begun. The Terran battleship drifted like a ghost through the void, silent and implacable, leaving behind only ruin and fear. The Empire was breaking apart system by system, world by world, without the humans even needing to fire another shot. Entire colonies surrendered before the battleship even arrived, governors fled in the night, and soldiers deserted their posts, unwilling to face the legend that haunted the stars. But for all the silence of the Terran ship, there was one question burning in every mind across the galaxy. Why had they come? Was this conquest, vengeance, or something else? The rulers of the Empire could not answer, and neither could the common people. They only knew that their fleets had died, their armies had failed, and their empire was collapsing. Then, for the first time since its return, the Terran ship spoke again. The message came without warning, carried across every frequency, every channel, every world. It was not a threat, not a warning, but a statement. A human voice, calm and steady, spoke in words that every race understood, for the Terrans had chosen to use the old galactic tongue. The voice said, "We left the stars once, but now we return. We do not kneel. We do not forget." The galaxy fell silent as the words echoed. On the Empire's worlds, billions listened, their hearts frozen. On rebellious colonies, cheers rose as people shouted the words back into the streets. For the first time in history, the people heard humanity speak not as myth or legend, but as reality. The rulers trembled in fear, for they understood the meaning. The Terrans remembered the crimes of the Empire, the wars of the past, the destruction of their early colonies. They had not vanished into extinction as the Empire had claimed. They had hidden, they had rebuilt, and now they had returned stronger than anyone could imagine. The voice continued, firm and unyielding. "Your empire has ruled through fear. You have enslaved, you have destroyed, you have broken the weak. But your time is over. We are humanity, and we do not forgive." The people of the Empire could not believe what they were hearing. No one had ever spoken to the Empire's rulers like this, not in 1,000 years. And yet here was one voice, speaking not with fear, but with absolute authority, declaring their end. On border worlds, soldiers threw down their weapons and joined rebellions, shouting the words of the Terrans. On planets deep inside the Empire, slaves rose against their masters, inspired by the voice that told them their chains could be broken. Chaos spread faster than any fleet could move, and the Empire's control collapsed even further. In the capital, the council was in chaos. Some demanded that the Terran ship be destroyed at any cost. Others whispered of surrender, their pride crushed under the weight of reality. The Emperor himself sat in silence, his hands clenched in fear, for he knew the truth better than anyone. The Terrans had not come for negotiations. They had not come for territory. They had come for judgment. And judgment could not be escaped. As the Terran ship moved closer to the capital, the rulers tried desperately to respond. They sent messages begging for talks, offering wealth, offering entire worlds, even offering to surrender their fleets. But the humans did not answer. They had said enough. Their message was clear. The age of the Empire was ending. On distant worlds, stories spread like wildfire. Children repeated the words of the humans in the streets, painting symbols of Terran warships on the walls of their cities. Old songs about freedom, banned for centuries, were sung again. The Empire's armies were powerless to stop it. Every attempt to silence the people failed, because every soldier, every commander, every governor had already heard the same message in their own hearts. Humanity had returned, and there was no stopping them. The Terran battleship finally appeared at the edge of the capital system. Millions of sensors tracked its approach, and billions of eyes watched through screens, waiting for its next move. The Empire's last remaining fleets gathered in defense, a pitiful force compared to what had once been mighty. They lined up in trembling silence, knowing they could not win, but too afraid to disobey the Emperor's orders. The battleship drifted closer, unstoppable, a shadow that grew larger with every passing hour. And then, once more, the voice of humanity filled the galaxy. You feared us. You erased us. But we endured. We watched from the dark while your empire rose, and we waited. Now your empire falls, and the stars will remember why. Those words broke the last of the Empire's pride. Admirals ordered retreats before the battle even began. Entire ships surrendered without firing. Civilians on the capital world screamed in terror, their streets filled with panic, their skies filled with fire as defenses powered up in desperation. And still, the battleship came on, silent, calm, certain. The Empire's rulers hid in their palaces, but they could feel it too. The humans had not just returned with weapons. They had returned with memory, with history, with purpose. And nothing in the galaxy could stop them. As the battleship's weapons powered up, glowing like the eyes of gods, the galaxy knew the truth. This was not simply a war. This was judgment. Humanity had spoken, and their message was final. The age of the Empire was ending, and a new age was beginning. The capital of the Empire had always been a symbol of eternal power. Its towers of crystal and steel stretched into the skies, its palaces gleamed with wealth stolen from 1,000 worlds, and its armies stood ready to crush any who dared resist. For centuries it had been untouchable, the heart of the Empire and the throne of its emperor. But now, as the Terran battleship entered the system, the heart of the Empire trembled for the first time in its long history. Sirens screamed across the capital world as citizens looked up at the skies, where the fleet of defenders gathered in a desperate line. Once the Empire could summon thousands of warships, but now only a fraction remained. Broken fleets, battered cruisers, and half-prepared frigates floated nervously, their captains well aware that they stood against a force no one could defeat. Inside the council chambers the rulers shouted over one another in panic. Some demanded to launch every weapon, others demanded surrender, but none had a plan that would save them. The Emperor sat on his throne in silence, his eyes dark with fear. He knew what the others refused to say aloud. Their empire was already dead, and the Terrans had come only to deliver the final blow. As the battleship drew closer, the defenders opened fire first. Beams of energy cut across the void, missiles streaked through space, and the skies above the capital burned with desperate fury. But the Terran ship did not flinch. Its shields absorbed the storm without effort, its weapons remained silent, and it advanced like an unstoppable force of nature. Panic spread among the defenders as they realized the truth. Their greatest firepower was meaningless. Whole squadrons broke formation and fled, abandoning the capital to its fate. The commanders shouted orders, but fear drowned their voices. Then the Terran battleship answered. Its guns lit up like suns, and in a single volley entire fleets vanished. Cruisers shattered, battleships exploded, and in moments the skies were filled with fire and wreckage. The defenders who survived begged for mercy, but the Terrans did not stop. They advanced toward the planet itself, weapons glowing with the promise of destruction. On the surface, chaos erupted. Citizens fled through the streets, screaming as fire rained down from the heavens. Government buildings shook with explosions, palaces crumbled, and the Emperor's guards abandoned their posts. The proudest city in the galaxy was becoming a battlefield. In the throne room the Emperor finally spoke. His voice trembled as he whispered, "This is the end." His council broke into panic, some fleeing, some begging him to surrender, but the Emperor knew there was no surrender left to give. The Terrans had not come for peace. They had come for judgment. Above the world the battleship began its bombardment. It did not strike blindly. Its weapons targeted the heart of the Empire's rule, the military headquarters, the slave markets, the centers of power that had fed on suffering for centuries. Each blast was precise, each strike a statement, and with every explosion the Empire's legacy crumbled. For the people, it was both terror and liberation. Chains were broken as prisons exploded, slaves ran free as their masters fled, and ordinary citizens watched in awe as the empire that had ruled them for generations was torn apart before their eyes. On the ground, rebellion ignited. Crowds stormed the palaces, burning the banners of the empire, tearing down statues of rulers who had claimed to be gods. The streets filled with shouts not of fear but of defiance. The Terran ship had not only destroyed fleets, it had lit a fire in the hearts of the oppressed, and that fire spread faster than any weapon. Inside the palace, the Emperor stood alone. His guards had deserted him, his council had fled, and his city was in flames. He walked to the great window overlooking the burning capital, and for the first time in his long rule, he felt powerless. The Terran battleship hung in the skies above, silent and merciless, and he knew that everything he had built was gone. His empire, his throne, his power, all had been swept away by a single ship and the will of humanity. In his final moments he whispered to himself, "We thought they were gone. We thought we were safe. We were wrong." And then the palace shook with the final strike. The walls crumbled, the throne collapsed, and the Emperor was buried in the ruins of his own arrogance. The fall of the capital was complete. Across the galaxy the news spread instantly. The heart of the Empire had been broken, the Emperor was dead, and the Terrans had claimed victory. For the oppressed it was a signal to rise, and for the rulers it was a sign to flee. Entire systems declared independence, whole fleets abandoned the Empire's banner, and the galaxy shifted in a single night. The Empire that had lasted for centuries was no more. The Terran battleship remained above the ruined capital, watching in silence as flames consumed the once great city. It did not gloat, it did not speak, it simply remained, a shadow over the broken world. And in that silence the galaxy understood the truth. Humanity had returned not just to fight, but to end tyranny itself. The fall of the capital was not only the fall of a city. It was the fall of an age. And as the fires burned and the people shouted their freedom in the streets, the legend of humanity grew even greater. The Empire had fallen, but the story was not over. For the galaxy now waited to see what the Terrans would do next. Would they rebuild the stars, or would they burn all who stood against them? No one knew. But one thing was certain. The age of fear was gone, and the age of humanity had begun. The fall of the Empire's capital spread across the galaxy like a storm. Worlds that had lived under the Empire's shadow for centuries now saw their chance for freedom. The news of the Emperor's death, of the palace in ruins, and of the Terran battleship standing victorious above the broken city ignited a fire in every oppressed heart. On distant mining colonies slaves overpowered their masters and raised banners of rebellion. On agricultural planets farmers chased out the overseers who had stolen their harvests for generations. Even on worlds deep within the Empire's core, whispers of freedom turned into shouts as people filled the streets, declaring that the Empire was finished. The galaxy, once ruled by fear, now moved with hope. Yet the rise of the free worlds was not simple. Without the Empire's iron grip, chaos began to spread. Old rivalries reawakened, powerful warlords tried to seize control, and governors who once bowed to the Emperor now crowned themselves as kings. Across the stars new flags appeared, each claiming to lead the future. But above it all, the shadow of humanity remained. The Terran battleship did not leave after the fall of the capital. It drifted across liberated worlds, silent and watchful, and everywhere it appeared, people remembered who had broken the Empire's chains. For many, the Terrans became a symbol of hope, guardians of the weak, judges of the corrupt. For others, they were a threat, a power too great to be trusted. In one system, a council of leaders gathered to decide the fate of their worlds. They were once slaves, miners, workers, and soldiers who had risen against their masters. Now they sat around a great table carved from the ruins of an imperial palace, debating what the galaxy should become. Some argued for unity under a new alliance of free worlds. Others demanded independence, fearing any new government would become another empire. But as their voices rose in conflict, the arrival of the Terran battleship silenced them all. The ship appeared in orbit, its shadow falling across their cities, and once more the voice of humanity filled the skies. The message was clear, spoken with calm but unyielding strength. We are not your rulers. We will not build a new empire. We are humanity, and we stand for freedom. Rule yourselves, but never again allow chains to bind your people. The leaders listened in silence, and for the first time in memory, the galaxy heard words not of conquest, but of liberation. The people cheered, and the council swore an oath to create a union of free worlds, not under the Terrans, but alongside them. Yet even as hope spread, danger grew. In the shadows of the collapsing empire, warlords gathered fleets, mercenaries carved out territories, and old enemies long hidden saw their chance to rise. The fall of the capital had not ended conflict, it had unleashed it. Some worlds begged the Terrans to stay and protect them. Others feared their presence and demanded they leave. Humanity had sparked freedom, but the galaxy was uncertain if it could handle it. In the ruins of the Empire's capital itself, survivors gathered, trying to rebuild. Some still clung to loyalty for the Emperor, whispering of vengeance. Others sought peace, desperate to escape the endless fire. The Terran battleship remained in orbit, silent as ever, watching as the old world crumbled and the new world struggled to rise. To the common people, the ship was a legend come to life, proof that justice could exist among the stars. To the powerful, it was a warning that tyranny would no longer be tolerated. Stories spread faster than light. Children painted Terran symbols on their walls, rebels sang songs of their return, and across 1,000 worlds, people spoke of humanity not as myth, but as saviors. But the Terrans themselves remained silent. No one knew their true numbers, no one knew their true strength, and no one knew if the battleship was alone or the vanguard of a fleet. That silence created both hope and fear. Some leaders dreamed of alliance with the humans. Others feared that one day the Terrans would decide to claim the galaxy for themselves. And still, the ship moved, drifting from one world to another, its presence enough to spark rebellions and topple tyrants without firing a shot. On one liberated planet, a child looked up at the sky, saw the Terran ship, and whispered, "The stars are free again." On another, a soldier who had once served the Empire threw down his weapon and swore to fight only for his people from that day forward. Across the galaxy, the rise of the free worlds continued. But unity was fragile, and the future uncertain. The Empire was gone, yet power always seeks to rise. The Terrans had broken the chains, but could the galaxy keep itself free without them? No one knew, but all eyes remained fixed on the humans, the ghosts who had returned from the void to shatter an empire. The age of fear was over, but a new age was only beginning, and the galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what humanity would do next. The galaxy celebrated the fall of the Empire, but in the dark corners of space shadows began to gather. Not everyone accepted freedom, and not everyone welcomed the Terrans. Among the ruins of the fallen capital, a secret order of loyalists survived. They were former generals, admirals, and spies of the emperor, bound not by honor but by vengeance. They called themselves the Shadow Resistance, and their oath was simple: the empire may have fallen, but its spirit would never die. While the free world struggled to rebuild, the shadows spread whispers across star systems. They promised safety to those afraid of chaos, power to those hungry for war, and vengeance to those who had lost status under freedom. Broken fleets that had fled the Terran battleship began to regroup under their banner. Secret shipyards hidden in asteroid belts worked day and night, building new weapons with stolen technology. The Shadow leaders believed one thing above all: humanity could not be allowed to rule the galaxy, and the Terrans must be destroyed. Yet they did not reveal themselves openly. Instead they moved in silence, striking at weak worlds, sabotaging councils of unity, and assassinating leaders who sought peace. On newly freed planets, celebrations quickly turned to fear as unknown fleets appeared in the skies, raiding cities and vanishing into the void. No one knew who they were, but whispers grew louder: the Empire was not truly dead. The Terran battleship watched these events closely. Its sensors caught the trails of shadow fleets, its intelligence mapped the pattern of attacks, and its commanders saw the truth. The Empire's loyalists had returned, and they were preparing for war. The humans faced a choice. They could strike quickly, hunt the shadows before they grew strong, but to do so meant risking the fragile trust of the free worlds who feared Terran power. Or they could remain silent, watching, waiting, allowing the shadows to reveal themselves fully. The commander of the battleship stood before his crew, his voice steady but grave. The Empire is broken, but not destroyed. If these shadows rise unchecked, the galaxy will burn again. Humanity freed them once, but freedom is fragile. We must decide carefully: strike too hard, and they will fear us. Wait too long, and the shadows will consume them. His crew nodded, ready to follow. But deep within, each of them knew the truth. The Shadow Resistance would not stop. They were fueled by hatred, by loyalty to a dead throne, and by the burning need to destroy the Terrans. Across the galaxy the shadows grew bolder. On one world they unleashed a biological weapon that wiped out entire cities overnight. On another, they hijacked a fleet of transport ships and turned them into weapons of terror. And in the darkest act yet, they infiltrated the Council of Free Worlds itself, assassinating key leaders and leaving the alliance shaken. Panic spread, and fear returned. The same people who had once celebrated the Terrans now asked if humanity could truly protect them. Some even began to whisper that the Terrans themselves had created the shadows, that it was all part of a plan to control the galaxy. The Terran commander knew the war of shadows was not only fought with weapons but with lies. If the free worlds turned against humanity, the galaxy would collapse into chaos once more. The battleship moved into action. It hunted the shadow fleets through nebulae and asteroid fields, striking with precision, destroying bases before they could grow. Each battle was fierce, for the shadows fought with desperation, willing to sacrifice entire fleets if it meant damaging the Terrans. Yet no matter how many battles the humans won, the Shadow Resistance never vanished. It was like fighting smoke: every time they crushed one cell, another rose elsewhere. The Terran crew began to wonder if the shadows had help from beyond. The Empire had stretched across half the galaxy, and many races had profited from its tyranny. Perhaps some of them now worked with the Loyalists, seeking to restore their own power. The commander feared this was true. He had seen encrypted transmissions intercepted by their sensors, messages that hinted at alliances forming in the dark. The shadows were not just an echo of the Empire, they were becoming something new, something far more dangerous. Meanwhile, the free world stood on the edge of collapse. The council debated endlessly but made no progress. Some argued that they should form a new fleet under Terran command to hunt the shadows, while others shouted that placing Terrans in control would only trade one empire for another. Distrust grew, and in that distrust the shadows thrived. In the silence of space, the Terran battleship drifted, its crew weary but determined. They had destroyed an empire, but the war was not over. The true enemy was not just ships and weapons, but fear itself. And fear was spreading once more. The commander stood at the observation deck, staring into the stars. He spoke softly, not to his crew but to himself. We ended their empire. But now their ghosts rise to take its place. The galaxy must decide, stand together, or fall into shadow again. Humanity cannot fight this war alone. But we will not allow tyranny to return. Not while we still breathe. In that moment the battleship received a signal, faint but clear. A secret transmission from deep space, marked with the seal of the Shadow Resistance. It carried a single message: humanity, your time is ending. You freed the stars, but soon the stars will burn. The Empire will rise again. The crew listened in silence, their faces grim. They knew what it meant. The shadows were not hiding anymore. They were declaring war. The galaxy stood at the edge of fire. The Shadow Resistance was no longer a whisper, no longer hidden in the cracks of dying worlds. They had revealed themselves as the heirs of the fallen empire, uniting broken fleets, warlords, and traitors under their banner. Their goal was simple: destroy the Terrans, crush the free worlds, and rebuild the empire in blood. For weeks their fleets had moved like storms, striking across star systems, burning colonies, and leaving chaos in their wake. The Council of Free Worlds was shattered, leaders divided by fear, and hope began to fade. But the Terran battleship remained. Alone it had brought down the Empire, alone it had defended countless planets, and alone it now faced the largest threat the galaxy had ever seen. The Shadow Resistance gathered their forces near the ruins of the Empire's core, building a massive armada of ships, larger than anything humanity had faced before. Spy reports whispered of thousands of warships, dreadnoughts refitted with stolen technology, and weapons designed to pierce even Terran armor. The final war was coming, and every world knew it. Across the stars people looked up, wondering if the Terrans could win one last time. The commander of the battleship stood before his crew. His voice was calm but carried the weight of history. This is it. They will come for us, not just with ships, but with fear. They want to break the free worlds by breaking us. If we fall, the galaxy falls. But we will not fall. We are humanity. We carry the fire that no shadow can extinguish. The crew answered with silence, but their eyes burned with determination. They had fought countless battles, but this would be the last. The Terran ship set course for the Empire's core, heading straight into the heart of the storm. When they arrived, the sight filled the void with dread. The Shadow Armada spread across space like a black sea, their warships blotting out the stars. At the center of the fleet was a massive flagship, larger than any vessel the galaxy had seen, a fortress of steel and darkness. It carried the symbol of the old empire, reborn in fire. The shadows hailed the Terrans, their voice echoing across every frequency. You are alone, humans. Your time has ended. The stars belong to us. The commander responded with calm defiance. We are never alone. The stars belong to the free. And today, your shadows burn. Then the battle began. The armada surged forward, wave after wave of ships firing beams, missiles, and plasma storms. The Terran battleship moved like a predator, dodging attacks, striking with precision. Its cannons roared, tearing through enemy cruisers, its shields flared bright as they absorbed the fury of 1,000 guns. Every hit shook the ship, but it did not falter. It fought with the strength of a fleet, every weapon firing in perfect unity. Yet the Shadow Armada was endless. For every ship destroyed, 2 more took its place. The Terran crew pushed the ship beyond its limits, their hands steady even as the hull screamed under the pressure of battle. Hours passed, and still the enemy came. The flagship of the Shadows moved forward, unleashing a weapon of pure energy designed to pierce Terran defenses. The blast struck the battleship, ripping through its shields, and for a moment silence filled the void. But the ship endured. Its hull burned, systems failed, but its core remained strong. The commander gave a single order: forward. The battleship charged into the heart of the armada, cutting through enemy lines with fire and steel. Its cannons destroyed dreadnoughts, its torpedoes split carriers in half, and its fighters swarmed like blades of light. The shadows tried to surround it, but the Terrans refused to yield. Then came the final duel. The battleship faced the massive Shadow flagship head-on. The enemy vessel unleashed everything: plasma storms, missile barrages, gravitational weapons that bent space itself. The Terran ship answered with its full fury, every gun, every missile, every ounce of power directed at the enemy. The clash shook the stars. Hulls cracked, shields shattered, and the void was filled with fire. At last the Terran commander gave the order for the final strike. The battleship's core weapon, a weapon never used before, powered up. Light brighter than a star gathered at its heart. The commander whispered the words his crew had waited to hear. For freedom. The weapon fired, a beam of pure energy that cut through the Shadow flagship, tearing it apart from within. The explosion lit the galaxy, a sun born of fire and vengeance. The Shadow armada faltered, their flagship destroyed, their leaders dead. Chaos spread through their ranks, ships fleeing, others surrendering, and some choosing to burn with their empire. The Terran battleship, scarred and burning, drifted among the ruins of the greatest armada ever assembled. It had stood alone, and it had won. Across the galaxy the news spread. The shadows were broken, the empire was gone, and the free worlds were safe. Cheers rose on countless planets, children looked up at the sky with hope, and the name of humanity became legend once more. Yet on the bridge of the battleship, there was no celebration. The crew sat in silence, their faces weary, their bodies bruised, but their hearts steady. They knew freedom was not permanent, that shadows would always return in some form. But they also knew something greater. Humanity had proven it would always rise to meet them. The commander looked out into the stars, his voice quiet but firm. The war is over, but the watch never ends. We are Terrans. And as long as we sail the void, the stars will remain free. The ship turned, leaving the battlefield behind, its engines blazing against the darkness. It was not just a battleship now. It was a symbol, a promise, a legend that would live in every story told across the galaxy. And so ended the war, not with silence, but with the roar of freedom echoing across the stars.